What happens when the nation's top law enforcer admits she's holding the most controversial list in America and no one demands to see it? That's exactly what happened when Attorney General Pam Bondi told the public that Jeffrey Epstein's client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now. A claim that should have changed everything, but somehow it didn't. No investigation, no release, no accountability, just silence. Until Congressman Ted Lieu decided he'd had enough. During a hearing that was supposed to be about inflation, Lieu shifted the entire conversation with one question that froze the room. Where is that client list? The tone in his voice wasn't theatrical. It was direct, controlled, and heavy with meaning. Because if Bondi's words were true, if that list really existed inside her office, then the issue isn't about bureaucracy.
Donald Trump, when he campaigned, promised on day one he would end inflation and lower costs. Donald Trump lied to the American people because we now know that inflation has continued to increase under his policies and that of Republicans. The most recent inflation report shows that inflation increased to 2.7% above expectations, and core CPI increased to 2.9%. We call on Trump and Republicans to focus on lowering costs instead of things like the big ugly bill that are kicking millions of people off health care. I've also noticed that there has been an uptick in activity around the Epstein files recently. I just want to remind the American people that in February of this year, Attorney General Pam Bondi acknowledged the existence of Jeffrey Epstein's client list. In fact, she said that Jeffrey Epstein's client list is, quote, sitting on my desk right now. Where is that client list? What is Attorney General Pam Bondi hiding? She needs to release the Epstein files as soon as possible. I talked about the Epstein files under the Biden administration. I'm talking about it under the Trump administration. This is a case of the powerful protecting the powerful. We need to have those files released. I also note that the Epstein files that have already been released show that Trump is all over the files. He's in multiple pictures with Jeffrey Epstein. There's multiple videos of Trump with Jeffrey Epstein. There are plane logs of Trump on Epstein's plane. There are statements by Trump about Epstein. There are court pleadings of alleged victims of Epstein naming Trump. So we need to have these Epstein files released. I also want to talk a little bit about Ukraine. The only way we get Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table is to defeat Russian troops on the battlefield. I support President Trump's decision to send Patriot missiles to Ukraine. I support President Trump's decision to say that he's going to backfill Europe's military equipment when Europe sends military equipment to Ukraine. And that is how we're going to get Putin to the negotiating table, by letting Putin know that he cannot win this war. And with that, I yield back.
It's about power, who has it, who's protected by it, and why the truth still hasn't seen the light of day. For months, Bondi's statement had been floating online like an open secret. It's on my desk, she said earlier this year. Those 6 words exploded across social media. Reporters, activists, even former prosecutors began asking how the Attorney General could publicly confirm possession of the files, then refuse to release them. And every time she was pressed for clarity, the response changed. First it was under review, then pending legal restrictions, and now nothing. No comment, no transparency, just a locked drawer and a growing list of questions. Ted Lieu wasn't about to let that slide. In the middle of a discussion about the economy, he brought up something no one else dared to touch. What is Attorney General Pam Bondi hiding? He asked. It wasn't just about Epstein. It was about whether the justice system still serves ordinary people or only the powerful. And in that moment, the hearing transformed from routine politics into something much bigger, a quiet confrontation over truth itself, because Bondi's words weren't just a slip, they were an admission. If she truly has those files, that means the U.S. government possesses direct evidence of who enabled, funded, and participated in Epstein's operations. But instead of disclosure, the response has been silence. Instead of justice, obstruction. And that's not just suspicious, it's dangerous. Because silence from those in power always means someone's being protected. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about partisanship. The Epstein case has haunted multiple administrations. Every time there's a chance for full transparency, the files get sealed, delayed, or lost. It's the same story, the powerful protecting the powerful. The network around Epstein didn't disappear when he did. It just went underground. And if the names on that list include high-ranking officials, CEOs, or influential donors, then the stakes aren't just legal. They're existential. When Lieu pressed Bondi, he wasn't playing to the cameras. He was doing what oversight is supposed to do, forcing the truth into the open. Because the moment she said, "It's on my desk," the American people became entitled to answers. How long has it been there? Who authorized her to keep it private? And why is a case involving trafficking and abuse still being treated like a state secret? The story behind those files isn't just about crimes. It's about cover-ups. According to reports, certain investigations were quietly narrowed. Witnesses were never called. Court filings that could have named participants were redacted or sealed. Journalists who pursued the truth found themselves stonewalled or discredited. And through it all, the same pattern repeated. Those with connections walked free, while victims waited for justice that never came. Bondi's refusal to clarify only deepened the mystery. If the investigation is over, why withhold the evidence? If it's ongoing, why admit publicly that the files are in her possession? It's a contradiction that doesn't make sense, unless transparency was never the goal. Because the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. This isn't incompetence. It's control. Lieu's confrontation brought something else to light: the difference between political theater and real accountability. While some lawmakers use hearings to score points, he used his time to expose hypocrisy, to remind the public that justice isn't a slogan. It's supposed to be a standard. His question wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. Because without accountability, power becomes permission. And that's exactly what the Epstein scandal represents. Permission for the elite to live by different rules. The files already released show fragments of that system: flight records, correspondence, and names that hint at how deep the network goes. They reveal a pattern of influence: money buying silence, connections shielding guilt, and institutions bending to protect reputations. Every piece of evidence tells the same story: power insulating itself from consequences. And yet, even with those clues, the most crucial document of all, the full client list, remains locked away. Think about that. A case that exposed one of the darkest trafficking rings in modern history, and the list of those who may have benefited or enabled it is being kept secret by the very government sworn to uphold justice. The implications are staggering. What happens if those names include sitting officials, major donors, or political allies? What happens when the system that's supposed to prosecute corruption becomes part of the cover-up? That's not speculation. It's history repeating itself. Because every time someone promises transparency, the files vanish again. But Ted Lieu's question cracked something open. He didn't accuse, he simply asked. And sometimes, a single question can shake the entire structure of silence. Where is that client list? It's not just a question for Bondi. It's for every official who's turned away from this investigation. Every administration that promised accountability and delivered excuses. Every institution that claims to protect victims while shielding abusers. When you look closer, the Epstein story becomes less about one man's crimes and more about how the powerful rewrite justice to protect themselves. It's about the hidden machinery of influence, the donations, the favors, the unspoken deals that keep certain doors closed. And if the nation's attorney general truly has those files in her possession, then the refusal to release them isn't just negligence. It's complicity. Lieu's exchange highlighted the difference between governance and gamesmanship. While others argued about policy, he focused on principle. He reminded America that transparency isn't optional. It's the foundation of trust. Because once the public believes justice is selective, the system starts to crumble. The Epstein files are more than evidence. They're a test of whether the country still believes in equal justice, or if certain people remain untouchable. Every sealed page, every redacted name, every no comment chips away at that belief. And when the person responsible for upholding the law is also the one concealing it, that's not just irony, it's betrayal. Bondi can't keep both stories straight. You can't claim to have the files and then pretend they don't matter. You can't call for justice while keeping the truth hidden. At some point, the contradictions collapse under their own weight. And when they do, the public won't forget who kept them in the dark. What makes Liu's question so powerful is its simplicity. It doesn't need speculation or conspiracy or headlines. It just needs an answer. Because if the client list truly exists, then the only people who fear its release are the ones with something to hide. And that truth terrifies more than any rumor ever could. This isn't about politics. It's about credibility. About whether the government serves justice or convenience. About whether laws apply evenly or only when they're politically safe. Because in a real democracy, justice doesn't hide behind red tape. It doesn't sit on someone's desk gathering dust. The public deserves to know who participated, who enabled, and who turned a blind eye. Because the moment those names come out, the system that's been protecting them begins to unravel. And maybe that's why it's being delayed. Because once the truth is visible, power loses control. That Ted Lieu didn't bring up Epstein to make headlines. He did it because someone had to. Because questions like his remind us that transparency isn't just a principle, it's protection. Protection for the public, for the victims, and for the integrity of the institutions that claim to defend both. Every time the government hides behind ongoing investigations or legal reviews, the silence speaks louder than the excuses. And it's not just about the Epstein case. It's about what kind of justice system America wants to be. One that protects privilege or one that exposes it. The Epstein scandal is unfinished justice. A wound that won't heal because the truth is still being withheld. And every time an official dodges the question, it reinforces the same message. Power serves itself first. But what Ted Lieu did, what his question symbolizes, is defiance. A refusal to accept silence as an answer, because justice can't exist in secret. The truth doesn't need permission to be seen. And the people who think they can bury it forever are forgetting one thing. The louder they hide it, the more the world starts asking why.so when Bondi claims the list is on her desk. That's not just a phrase. It's a promise waiting to be broken or kept. The difference depends on whether the public keeps demanding answers or lets the silence win. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Not the files, not the politics, but the principle. Because every time someone like Ted Lieu stands up and asks the uncomfortable question, it chips away at the walls built to keep the truth inside. If justice really means equal accountability, then no desk, no office, and no name should be immune from it. The American people deserve to see the full picture, not the sanitized version handed down by power. Because the moment we stop asking, the moment we stop demanding answers, the silence becomes permanent, and that's why this story matters. Because it's not just about one list. It's about whether truth still has a place in public life. Whether those sworn to protect justice are doing their jobs or protecting themselves. So here's the real question now. How long are we willing to wait for answers that should have been public years ago? Because if justice hides in a drawer, who's it really serving? If you believe the truth shouldn't be reserved for the powerful, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video. Because the only way silence wins is if we stop asking the questions that matter.